Why did you leave me?
Why did you betray your own heart?
At this moment, almost everyone who is interested in classics or movies, or is just chronically online, is aware of the trailer launch of Wuthering Heights, adapted from the famous Emily Bronte novel. While this trailer has gone viral, it is for all the wrong reasons. Since it has launched, there have been hundreds of controversies surrounding it on the internet, and it's pretty intense. And to be honest, it kinda makes sense why people are so against it. So the movie features Margot Robbie as Catherine Earnshaw and Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff. The cast selection was already receiving a lot of criticism from the beginning. But first, let's focus on what got everyone so triggered about an upcoming film that claims to be the greatest love story of all time. I guess things started to go downhill right from here. Wuthering Heights was never meant to be a romantic novel. Yes, it's easy to get confused with their dynamic, but it was a pure gothic novel. Secondly, the intense tension and several sensual scenes show how they made the movie overly erotic. The director of the film, Emerald Fennell, is well known for her take on erotica, especially after the graveyard scene in Saltburn. But the internet is losing it after she just twisted a classic novel. People are saying that as a director, she totally misunderstood the novel, but the list of controversies is quite long. So if you want to know more about it, stay with us and follow along.
Take a wife.
A wife? What wife?
Misinterpreting Gothic tragedy as a romance genre. First and foremost, let's talk about the most problematic part of the trailer. The movie is marketed as a romantic film. Moreover, it retells the novel as the greatest love story of all time. It wasn't even a love story to begin with. People in the comments section were actually pissed and confused about whether they had read the same novel as the trailer depicted. In the original novel, Emily Bronte wrote about a brutal Gothic exploration of obsession, cruelty, abuse, violence, generational trauma, and vengeance. And here in the trailer, they are portraying them as if they are soulmates in a forbidden romance trope who found each other after the world tried to pull them apart. Heathcliff wasn't a brooding prince. He was a man of cruelty who later turned his pain into vengeance. Same goes for Catherine, because she was also an impulsive, manipulative, and unstable woman who constantly shuffled between her ego and desire. Their connection was intense. Their conversations were melodramatic, but it was toxic as they brought out each other's darkest sides. Their obsession brought down everyone around them. They ruined not just the two families, but also the generations that followed as their choices, trauma, and anger spread like wildfire. For context, let's look at the novel's storyline, cutting to them as adults. When Heathcliff disappeared for 3 years, Catherine found herself trapped in a miserable marriage because she was obsessed with him the whole time, yet unwilling to choose him for his social status. But then Heathcliff returns as a wealthy, educated man of class and taste. Feeling the betrayal and, to make Catherine jealous, he then marries Edgar's sister, Isabella, purely out of spite and no affection at all. Soon after, he starts to abuse her emotionally and physically. Meanwhile, Heathcliff and Catherine forgave each other for their betrayal and became passionately involved. However, Catherine then dies from childbirth, and all the accumulated physical and emotional strain created with Heathcliff, who also loses his sanity after her death. He screamed for her ghost to haunt him for the rest of his life, which tells everything about how unhealthy the connection really was. Seeing Heathcliff like this, a pregnant Isabella then ran away to London. Instead of letting go, Heathcliff becomes even more monstrous after her death. He systematically destroys both the Earnshaws and the Lintons, taking their properties, raising their children in violence and resentment, and continuing the cycle of cruelty. He even tormented Hindley by imprisoning young Cathy, forcing his sickly son into a marriage, and manipulating every remaining family member until the next generation was nearly as broken as the first. Emily Bronte's novel was a study of how obsession curdles into vengeance, and how love twisted by pride becomes something dangerous and ugly. The novel is precisely the opposite of what the trailer's dreamy shots and greatest love story of all time tagline suggest. I mean, this is already a difficult novel to read because it is tough to like the characters, who are just tragic and full of misery. That is why it's called a gothic masterpiece and not a classic romance novel, unlike how the trailer is trying to market it to the masses. eroticizing the trailer by undermining the dark themes of the novel. Nobody was ready for what was coming in the trailer. Everyone was excited about getting a Wuthering Heights adaptation, but things went downhill pretty soon. As people watched the trailer, they were shocked to see a cinematic version of erotica rather than a gothic novel adaptation. In the trailer, there were multiple clips showing the heavy sensual stuff, like Heathcliff sticking his tongue on the wall, Catherine's parted lips, heavy breathing, slow caresses, their bodies being pressed together in dim lighting, and a lot of intense tension. The point is, if it weren't an adaptation of Wuthering Heights, all this would have made sense. It would work well because there is indeed a lot of chemistry between Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie, but the chemistry feels strange here because this is a novel based on psychological torment, obsession and toxicity. To a point, it feels uncomfortable. Also, as the trailer barely shows any of the violence, cruelty and ugliness from the novel, the sensual elements naturally take centre stage. The trailer made the characters seem more fetishized than understood. Everyone's rightly leaving really unhinged responses to this, commenting how the director that made Saltburn woke up and felt like making something with the same vibe again, but set in 19th century Yorkshire. I think the film relies a lot on the erotic framing that makes it look overrated. It's like the director Emerald Fennell intentionally chose two attractive casts with good chemistry to build tension and sexual appeal, rather than focusing on the substance of the novel. Maybe people would have been less disappointed if they had captured the emotional depth and sadism, rather than relying solely on the sex appeal in the trailer.
Why did you leave me?
Why did you betray your own heart?
Controversial casting choices and lost character authenticity. So, according to the novel, Catherine Earnshaw is supposed to be a young, impulsive teenager, and she even dies before 18 because of childbirth. No offence to Margot Robbie, she is an excellent actress, but casting her as a teenager does not seem fitting, according to the netizens, as she seems to be bringing a more mature, glamorous aura that teenage Catherine never had in the novel. Also, casting Jacob Elordi to play Heathcliff also does not make sense, because in Bronte's book, Heathcliff was a person of colour. Now, we have seen these mishaps before as well. It's not surprising or new. However, it was essential to stay true to the novel here because Heathcliff's race and ethnicity explained the racial torment and experience he went through in his early life that became the root of his obsession and rage in his later life. In the novel, he is typically treated as inferior because he looks different and belongs to a world different from the Earnshaws. The Earnshaw siblings were rich and spoiled, and he was the exact opposite. He was taken in by their father and was treated like a servant by Catherine's brother, Hindley Earnshaw. So when the trailer featured a very tall, very conventional, Hollywood-looking Jacob Elordi, the book-obsessed fans were disappointed because he does not embody the core aspects of Heathcliff. While people are not hating on Margot Robbie or Jacob Elordi, the casting choice has certainly washed out the novel's themes. What was supposed to be a tragic coming-of-age obsession seems to have shifted to two grown adults just making terrible decisions.
Mr. Linton asked me to marry him.
Historical inaccuracy in costuming and styling. Another problem is the inaccurate historical representation of fashion from the late 1700s to the early 1800s. One of the controversial costumes used was Catherine's wedding dress. Margot Robbie was seen wearing a tight-fitting corset, a super voluminous skirt, a tiara, and a cathedral veil. First of all, wedding dresses were not even the norm before Queen Victoria got married in 1840. Secondly, they used a crinoline under the gown to make it look more voluminous, but even that came much later into fashion. The hoop skirts she wore were also not a part of the silhouette during the period in which Wuthering Heights took place. Even beyond the dress, the entire styling feels way too polished. From the perfect hair to the clean fabrics and the makeup, everything looks a bit too modernised for a girl living in an isolated manor. During the 1800s, Catherine is supposed to be wild, messy and unrefined, according to the book, not the perfectly dolled up version they showed in the trailer.
Don't be cruel to my servants.
Directors' creative liberties versus fans' expectations. Emerald Fennell has never failed to sing the praise of Wuthering Heights. Once she was asked about the grave scene in Saltburn, she said she was inspired by Heathcliff digging up Catherine's grave. She read the novel when she was 14 and says it cracked her open. Since then, she had always dreamt of adapting the film, and so She defended her movie with everything she had. Fennell describes her version of the film as primal and sexual, like what she felt when she first read the novel. According to her, making this film was very personal. Apparently, the novel drove her mad, and she related to the characters very innately. Fennell even confirmed that the movie's storyline will not continue the novel's version after Catherine's death. She has put her own touch and understanding into it. Also, she felt there was a lot of sadomasochism in Bronte's writing, which she tried to highlight. She even defends her casting, saying nobody could have done a better job than they did, and that not everything has to be accurate. As a director, Fennell is proud of her piece of work, but these justifications feel short for the people who love literature and for those who have read the novels. Listening to things like, "Not everything has to be historically or textually accurate," was very disrespectful and dismissive towards the fans. Yes, artists have the freedom to make changes and add their own touch, but if it doesn't give justice to the actual literature, it might become a problem. The utmost concern of the fans is the scale and nature of the sexual content, using explicit suggestive scenes like the bread dough and the egg yolk. She was always praised for her use of sensationalism in her other films, but Wuthering Heights was meant to capture the Gothic tragedy. The viewers even felt the directors did not value the novel's sentiments, like how they sanitized the class disparity, erased the racial tension, stripped away the social cruelty, and brushed off the ethnic boundaries that shaped the dynamic of the original story. So ultimately, we can conclude that after watching the trailer, people's feelings are visibly hurt. The internet is so flooded with controversies that even the general public is aware of them. Some people have even read the novel to understand what all the fuss is about, and most agree that the trailer was quite different from the novel, and that also in a problematic way. Still, you will find one comment in a sea full of critics who are still rooting for what the movie has to offer. So all we have to do is wait and see how the film works once it gets released. If a 2-minute trailer managed to stir up this level of controversy, the whole movie is definitely going to make a mark. But will it stir up more controversies, or will it change people's perspective on it? Well, we have to wait to find out about this until February 2026. Having said that, what is your opinion of the Wuthering Heights trailer? Let us know about your thoughts in the comment box below.